С нетерпением вас ждут в Индии для нашего 23-го по счету ежегодного саммита между нашими странами.
एक्सेलेंसी, ये हमारे स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की गहराई और व्यापकता का परिचायक है। कठिन से कठिन परिस्थितियों में भी भारत और रूस हमेशा कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चले हैं। हमारा करीबी सहयोग न केवल दोनों देशों के लोगों के लिए बल्कि वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और समृद्धि के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है।
Уважаемый господин президент, это свидетельствует о том, насколько глубоким и всеобъемлющим является наше особо привилегированное и стратегическое партнерство. Даже при самых тяжелых обстоятельствах Индия и Россия всегда шли вперед, плечом к плечу. Наше тесное сотрудничество имеет значение не только для народов наших двух стран, но и для обеспечения глобального мира, стабильности и процветания.
एक्सेलेंसी, यूक्रेन में चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय में हम लगातार चर्चा करते रहे हैं। हाल में किए गए शांति के सभी प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम आशा करते हैं कि सभी पक्ष कंस्ट्रक्टिवली आगे बढ़ेंगे, संघर्ष को जल्द से जल्द खत्म करने और स्थायी शांति स्थापित करने का रास्ता खोजना होगा। ये पूरी मानवता की पुकार है। एक्सेलेंसी, एक बार फिर आपका मैं हृदय से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूँ।
Уважаемый господин президент, по теме продолжающегося конфликта на Украине мы регулярно обмениваемся мнениями. Мы приветствуем все недавно предложенные усилия для установления мира и надеемся, что все стороны будут подходить к этому вопросу конструктивно. Необходимо искать пути для скорейшего завершения конфликта и установления мира. Это и есть призыв всего человечества. Ваше превосходительство, дорогой друг, еще раз большое спасибо. Очень рад вас видеть.
Спасибо. धन्यवाद।
Big developments are reporting on. The Prime Minister has made it clear that both the countries have stood by each other during the difficult times. He's also made it a point to make a reference really to the Ukraine-Russia war, talking about the fact that India hopes that the conflict will end soon. It's a point that has been made by the Prime Minister in the past as well. Both the nations really, of course, reaffirming their ties and the close cultural, economic, historic trade ties between both the nations, speaking about how both the countries have stood by each other in difficult times. And as far as optics, just when the trade war with the US is escalating is concerned, we had all of it, the bonhomie between the two world leaders on full display today at the SCO summit. This, of course, is what's happening alongside the bilaterals as far as Russia and India is concerned. We just heard from the Prime Minister. Remember, it's the dispute with the US over doing business with Russia in terms of buying oil from Russia is concerned that has led to the souring of ties between India and the US. They've, of course, the Prime Minister, of course, in his message to Russia today has spoken about the close ties between both the nations, importantly talking about the fact that they've stood with each other. It's an important message that has gone out from the Prime Minister, referring to difficult times and how both the countries have stood by each other. Also making, in fact, an important reference to the need to end the war right now. He has raised this matter once again. He is not shied away from raising this in the past as well. On that point, I'm going to go straight back to Geeta Mohan, a foreign affairs editor, for more on that. Geeta, importantly, the Prime Minister once again reiterating the need, of course, to end the war, which he says the world is looking at both the countries and India hopes that this war will end, making an important point about the countries standing by each other during difficult times, isn't it?
Well, Prime Minister Narendra Modi Sneha was one of the first leaders to say this is not an era of war. And he reiterates that while Peter Navarro can say that this is Modi's war, the fact of the matter is that President Putin also has emphasized that this is that India has played a very important and key role in talking peace. So the US might differ, but the stakeholders over here credit India for the initiatives and the efforts towards peace. Now, the two leaders are meeting, Sneha, and I'm repeating this all over again. The Russian president, the importance of discussing Trump tariffs is there, but there's so many other aspects to be discussed.
True.
Having said that, the tariff war between India and the US is because India is buying Russian oil. Much of it will end should Russia and Ukraine sit at the negotiating table and negotiate a peace deal between the two countries. That's critical and important. While Donald Trump has been saying that, Prime Minister Modi is also emphasizing the same thing. Get peace so that all these disruptions stop, or at least the additional tariffs and the additional pressure that India is feeling because of buying Russian oil. And that's just a pretext. It's more so to do with India-Pakistan and the fact that the ceasefire was not credited to Donald Trump. But a lot of it will be taken care of. And then Donald Trump will actually be honored to have brokered peace between two countries rather than claiming having brokered one where he did not really play a role. So give Donald Trump what he wants. And also there is a need for peace right now between Russia and Ukraine so that there's more stability in Europe, in the region, and in the world.
And the need really for the Prime Minister, in fact, to be that one country, in fact, or India to be that one country that is, in fact, in conversation with both Ukraine. We've seen a phone call that has been made by President Zelensky also just ahead of this important meeting today, really talking about the fact that there has to be, continuous engagement in terms of the peace talks between both the nations. Isn't it? And hence that call went out yesterday, Geeta.
Well, that's right. Absolutely. The fact that there is a need for talks between to maintain peace, to bring about peace, and remember the conversation between President Putin, Sneha, and Prime Minister Modi, like you said, took place way before.
Geeta, I'm just going to come back to you in a moment from now to talk about that further. Just give me a moment. We'll in fact listen in once again to what the Prime Minister said as far as the bilaterals between both the nations are concerned. Here are the Prime Minister's opening remarks. Listen in.
आपसे मिलकर बहुत खुशी हो रही है और मैं हमेशा अनुभव करता हूं कि आपको मिलना मतलब एक यादगार मीटिंग भी होती है, बहुत सी चीज़ों की जानकारियों का आदान प्रदान करने का अवसर मिलता है। हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। दोनों पक्षों के बीच नियमित रूप से कई उच्च स्तरीय बैठकें भी हुई है। इस वर्ष दिसंबर में हमारी 23वीं समिट के लिए 140 करोड़ भारतीय उत्सुकता पूर्वक आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, ये हमारे स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की गहराई और व्यापकता का परिचायक है। कठिन से कठिन परिस्थितियों में भी भारत और रूस हमेशा कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चले हैं। हमारा करीबी सहयोग न केवल दोनों देशों के लोगों के लिए बल्कि वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और समृद्धि के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। एक्सेलेंसी, यूक्रेन में चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय में हम लगातार चर्चा करते रहे हैं। हाल में किए गए शांति के सभी प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम आशा करते हैं कि सभी पक्ष कंस्ट्रक्टिवली आगे बढ़ेंगे। संघर्ष को जल्द से जल्द खत्म करने और स्थायी शांति स्थापित करने का रास्ता खोजना होगा। ये पूरी मानवता की पुकार है। एक्सेलेंसी, एक बार फिर आपका मैं हृदय से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Going to go straight across to India today's Gaurav Sawant as well, getting in more details on that big story that he's tracking from China. Gaurav, your quick take on what do you think of the Prime Minister's statement as far as both the nations standing by each other is concerned. I also want to talk to you a little about what the Prime Minister has spoken about vis-a-vis the tensions in the between Ukraine and Russia and the war that has spanned for, in fact, months and years together. Now, but first, a little about India and Russia standing by each other in difficult times.
What a strong statement. What a strong statement from the Indian Prime Minister, Sneha. India and Russia stand tall, and India and Russia stand strongly together in these very difficult times. And the Prime Minister's statement, remember, when the Prime Minister speaks, every word is measured, every word is actually uttered for effect. So he says India-Russia partnership or India-Russia friendship is important for peace and for stability, and that India and Russia have been partners together and will continue to strive for peace. In fact, he said India welcomes all efforts that are being made to find lasting, just and fair peace between Russia and Ukraine. India will continue to appreciate all efforts that will be made, because this is the call of humanity. ये मानवता की पुकार है कि स्थायी शांति हो, रूस और यूक्रेन के बीच युद्ध समाप्त हो. Words to that effect. So very, very significant statement of Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a time when the West has doubled down on attacks specifically on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, calling it Modi's war on Ukraine. And that is so unfair. I mean, it's not that we are the largest importers of Russian oil, but, you know, the Western propaganda, the Western efforts to browbeat India, the message is very clear. India will not let the West dictate terms to a country that's 1.4 billion strong.
Well, absolutely. You know, Geeta, I just want you to talk to us a little about how measured India's response has been, you know, in just so many days and weeks that, you know, US is doing what it can really to bully us, isn't it? Right from calling this, Modi's war, getting personal in that sense, as well talking about how because we do business with Russia, that's how the war is getting funded. I mean, this is hypocrisy at just, I don't know how many levels, given that US continues to do business with Russia and so do other European nations. But singling out India like that, but India's response so far has been extremely guarded and also measured, isn't it? And that again is reflected today from what the Prime Minister has said.
Well, absolutely. Very mature statement, mature responses, and mature behavior in terms of how India is reacting to all the provocations that are coming from Washington. But the fact is that the hypocrisy runs rather deep and deeper than what you just said, Sneha. It's not just about the fact that they engage Russia. It's the fact that India imports oil from Russia. So does China in a much larger volume and quantity. America has done nothing about that. More importantly, when the war broke out during winters, Europe was starved for energy and asked America to help with energy. They say, okay, there's a war on, and it was Biden administration. We don't have resources or energy. How are you going to compensate if you're asking us not to buy Russian oil? America then went to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia refused to increase the output of barrels because why should they produce more oil at the same rate to keep the global prices stabilized and use up their finite resource? That's when America asked India to buy oil from Russia at a capped price and sell it to its allies. Those are their European partners. In fact, there's a report now that says that even Ukraine has bought diesel from India. So hypocrisy runs deeper than whether if America is engaging Russia or not. It's America that asked India to buy that very same Russian oil so that their then allies could be serviced.
That's right. You know, Geeta, be with us. I just want to bring in Gaurav on something that I was talking to you also about. You know, Gaurav, this entire argument about this war being Modi's war really is something that, isn't obviously cutting any ice. And also the parties involved themselves are, I would say, not even taking cognizance of what has been said by the US president, isn't it? We have Ukraine calling up India, calling up the Prime Minister of India and talking about the fact that because there's an important bilateral with Russia tomorrow, which is today technically, hence, the effort should be to talk peace. Russia too has lauded India's efforts as far as, conversations and talks around peace really is concerned. So the parties involved also, both sides have in a way, dismissed what Trump has been saying, isn't it?
So Donald Trump's hypocrisy and the hypocrisy of the White House, people like Pete Navarro and others, there are others who are associated very closely to a certain George Soros, who have been in the past associated with George Soros, and the kind of statements they've been making against India. So there is a pattern to this. The US hypocrisy is there for the world to see, except that in today's world, America is unable to talk down to India. In the past, they may have attempted to do so. In the past, there may have been certain elements, a certain ecosystem that's encouraged, that may have carried that American propaganda forward, but not in today's day and age. In this interconnected world, it doesn't work. And India has also put out facts in public domain. So, China procures more oil from Russia than India does. So why is it there are no sanctions, no additional sanctions on China? There's no response from the United States. You just ask them that question and they just start looking the other way, including those who are carrying this propaganda forward in the United States of America. European Union is procuring more gas compared to India, compared to anybody else. The largest importers of oil is Europe, and Europe is the one that's fueling this war in the other sense. Again, there's stunned silence from the United States of America. They want India to kowtow to the United States of America. They want India to come to the United States on a bent knee for a trade deal. Not happening. That's clearly not happening. The world has changed. Yes, India wants great relations with the United States of America. After all, both America and India have invested so heavily in each other. But if Donald Trump doesn't care, then the responsibility of taking this relationship forward does not lie squarely only on India's shoulders. India will continue to do all that India can. That's the word we get from our sources in the government. And that's why, if you notice, not one loose comment from anyone in the government. Every response has only been from the spokesperson or the Minister for External Affairs, making everything very clear. However, India will not buckle under US pressure. That's the signal that goes out.
Well, absolutely. There is no other way of describing India's response to all of this. It's just measured, like Geeta said, absolutely mature as well. And this is, in fact, in response to a flurry of, undesired comments that have been coming in from all kinds of things that are being said, from the side of the US administration. Loose comments, like Gaurav has put it. Geeta, I'm going to come to you a little about the optics of, this meeting as well. Not just the bilateral, but of course the SCO meeting and the pictures, in fact, that we saw coming in today of the conversations that were happening between the three world leaders, between China, Russia and India. Talk to us about how the West is watching this very, very closely, isn't it?
Well, that's right.
Yes.
If optics are to be played, then these optics will certainly rile Washington, or at least they should be concerned about what this means. The three biggest leaders coming together, standing together. But the Chinese have to realize the importance of this trilateral. They have to understand the importance of keeping Russia and India together. China is a very big country. We don't take away from the fact that China is an emerging superpower, the next superpower. And the race and the fight today is between China and America and no other. Look at the development. All those who dissed China today are there talking about the infrastructure and how it's grown. So we're not looking at that. But China has to look at India and Russia and know the importance of these two countries, Russia, India, China, coming together, aligning themselves, and not bickering at the border, not using transgressions as a card, as an instrument, and weaponizing border, which is what China does, could really mean and spell a huge difference in terms of how the West starts looking at these countries, even individually. So the power of this optics should be optimally utilized by all these leaders. India, Russia most probably understand that. China understands it, and is the reason why the optics and the photographers were there for the visuals to be sprayed across various networks across the world. But one has to walk the talk, and in that, China needs to walk the talk in showing that cohesiveness of this trilateral, this troika. I'm not even talking about the SCO, just this troika.
Geeta, you rightly put it as far as how China really needs to walk the talk here is concerned. I want to talk to that about Gaurav as well in a moment from now as far as the Prime Minister's statement on the Pahalgam terror attack is concerned. These are things that have been said in the past as well as far as condemning, in fact, terror attacks of this nature. But when it comes to walking the talk, we've often seen China really stand by Pakistan. And will there be a repeat of that is the big question here. Before we talk about that, listen in once again to what the Prime Minister said earlier at the bilateral.
आपसे मिलकर बहुत खुशी हो रही है और मैं हमेशा अनुभव करता हूं कि आपको मिलना मतलब एक यादगार मीटिंग भी होती है, बहुत सी चीज़ों की जानकारियों का आदान प्रदान करने का अवसर मिलता है। हम लगातार संपर्क में रहे हैं। दोनों पक्षों के बीच नियमित रूप से कई उच्च स्तरीय बैठकें भी हुई है। इस वर्ष दिसंबर में हमारी 23वीं समिट के लिए 140 करोड़ भारतीय उत्सुकता पूर्वक आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं। एक्सेलेंसी, ये हमारे स्पेशल एंड प्रिविलेज स्ट्रेटेजिक पार्टनरशिप की गहराई और व्यापकता का परिचायक है। कठिन से कठिन परिस्थितियों में भी भारत और रूस हमेशा कंधे से कंधा मिलाकर चले हैं। हमारा करीबी सहयोग न केवल दोनों देशों के लोगों के लिए बल्कि वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और समृद्धि के लिए महत्वपूर्ण है। एक्सेलेंसी, यूक्रेन में चल रहे संघर्ष के विषय में हम लगातार चर्चा करते रहे हैं। हाल में किए गए शांति के सभी प्रयासों का हम स्वागत करते हैं। हम आशा करते हैं कि सभी पक्ष कंस्ट्रक्टिवली आगे बढ़ेंगे, संघर्ष को जल्द से जल्द खत्म करने और स्थायी शांति स्थापित करने का रास्ता खोजना होगा। ये पूरी मानवता की पुकार है। एक्सेलेंसी, एक बार फिर आपका मैं हृदय से बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद करता हूं।
Gaurav is in fact with us. Gaurav, I want to ask you about what the Prime Minister said. In fact, after the nudge, we have seen the SCO issue a strong statement condemning the Pahalgam terror attack. Like I said at the outset, after Prime Minister Modi's nudge, China was there. You know, I want to ask you about things of this kind being said in the past as well as far as Mumbai terror attacks were concerned. References to Pakistan were made even at that point in time. But as we see, over the last few years or so, China continues to, in fact, in a way, support Pakistan. When it matters, China is always seen standing behind Pakistan. Do you expect things to change, especially after today?
Not at all. Not at all. Because China has its own strategic calculations and Pakistan plays a pivotal role in its strategic calculations. And China's calculations are to ensure, while it talks of a unipolar world, it does not, it talks of a multipolar world. It wants a unipolar Asia. It wants to be the only superpower in Asia. And India has made it very clear that while we all want a multipolar world, we also have to want a multipolar Asia. India and China can both grow together. They're both developing countries, but there's a big difference. China's an $18 trillion economy, we are a $4 trillion economy, so there's a massive difference. And to ensure India doesn't rise fast, China uses Pakistan as a tool, as a weapon to continue to bleed India and ensure you have lakhs and lakhs of troops deployed in counter-terrorism operations or along the line of control, and you spend a lot of your budget that can otherwise go for infrastructure projects in defense. So that's a weapon that that China has used in the past. However, India's Operation Sindoor was an absolute game changer. Despite China supporting Pakistan with weapons, with intelligence, with satellite imagery, with transparency in the battlefield, on the 10th of May, when the operations came to an end and Pakistan sought a ceasefire, there were 11 Pakistani air bases that were destroyed. There were 6 radar stations, including Chinese HQ-9 and HQ-16 radars, destroyed. The JF-17s, the J-10Cs, the PL-15s, all of them could not ensure that the Pakistani Air Force remained airborne. And all of that is a very clear indicator that India was on top. And the swagger of Prime Minister Narendra Modi here in Tianjin is an indicator that India emerged on top there and with the United States of America. India was able to stand up to United States bullying. So on multiple fronts, you notice India charting an independent foreign policy, a defense policy, and the fact that from 2020 to 2025 we've kept the LAC safe is again an indication that in case China truly wants peace, this is the opportunity. Peace that comes from strength that India has openly displayed.
You know, Gaurav, we spoke about the Prime Minister's remarks earlier today as far as terror attacks in Pahalgam is concerned, and after the nudge, we did see the SCO condemn it. We'll talk about that once again, and also a little on the deliverables as far as the bilaterals between Russia and India is concerned. But before that, listen in to what the Prime Minister, in fact, said as far as the horrific Pahalgam terror attacks were concerned.
एससीओ को लेकर भारत की सोच और नीति 3 मुख्य स्तंभों पर आधारित है। एससीओ, एस सिक्योरिटी, सी कनेक्टिविटी, ओ अपॉर्चुनिटी। पहले स्तंभ एस यानी सिक्योरिटी के संदर्भ में मैं कहना चाहता हूं कि सुरक्षा, शांति और स्थिरता किसी भी देश के विकास का आधार है। किंतु इस मार्ग में आतंकवाद, अलगाववाद और अतिवाद बड़ी चुनौतियां हैं। आतंकवाद सिर्फ किसी देश की सुरक्षा ही नहीं, बल्कि पूरी मानवता के लिए एक साझा चुनौती है। कोई देश, कोई समाज, कोई नागरिक अपने आप को इससे सुरक्षित नहीं समझ सकता। इसलिए आतंकवाद से लड़ाई में भारत ने एकजुटता पर बल दिया। इसमें एससीओ रेट्स की बहुत महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका रही। इस वर्ष भारत ने जॉइंट इंफॉर्मेशन ऑपरेशन को लीड करते हुए अल-कायदा और इससे जुड़े आतंकी संगठनों से लड़ने का इनिशिएटिव किया। हमने रेडिकलाइजेशन के विरुद्ध समन्वय बढ़ाने और मिलकर कदम उठाने का भी प्रस्ताव रखा। टेरर फाइनेंसिंग के खिलाफ आवाज उठाई। इसमें मेरे समर्थन के लिए मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। एक्सेलेंसी, भारत पिछले 4 दशकों से निर्मम आतंकवाद का दंश झेल रहा है। कितनी ही माताओं ने अपने बच्चे खोए और कितने बच्चे अनाथ हुए। हाल ही में हमने पहलगाम में टेररिज्म का बहुत ही घिनौना रूप देखा। इस दुख की घड़ी में जो मित्र देश हमारे साथ खड़े रहे, मैं उनका आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। यह हमला केवल भारत की अंतरात्मा पर ही आघात नहीं था, यह मानवता में विश्वास रखने वाले हर देश, हर व्यक्ति को खुली चुनौती थी। ऐसे में प्रश्न उठना स्वाभाविक है, क्या कुछ देशों द्वारा आतंकवाद का खुलेआम समर्थन हमें स्वीकार्य हो सकता है? एक्सेलेंसी, हमें स्पष्ट रूप से और एक स्वर में कहना होगा कि आतंकवाद पर कोई भी डबल स्टैंडर्ड स्वीकार्य नहीं हुई। हमें मिलकर आतंकवाद का हर रंग में, हर रूप में विरोध करना, ये मानवता के प्रति हमारा दायित्व है।
All right, that was the Prime Minister, in fact, referring to a range of issues. But most importantly, what stood out was the statement from the SCO on, in fact, rather the Prime Minister talking about the Pahalgam terror attacks. You know, Gaurav continues to be with us, and so does Geeta. Gaurav, coming to you quickly before I get in a word also from Geeta. You know, like I said, this has been said in the past as well. As far as condemnation of terror is concerned, other countries too have endorsed India's sentiments when it comes to the horrific Mumbai terror attacks from the year 2008. But what really matters is action on the ground punishing Pakistan. That is something that India's expectation really would be, isn't it?
It indeed would be, and in fact, one of the biggest drawbacks of an organization like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is that a victim of terror, India, and a state sponsor of radical Islamist terror, that's Pakistan, they're members of the same grouping that was actually formed to combat terrorism, extremism, and radicalism in all its forms and manifestations. Radicalism in Pakistan is a cause for grave concern, where a former prime minister has been assassinated, where governors have been assassinated, where judges have been killed by radical Islamists, and instead of condemning them, people in that country, they shower flower petals and rose petals on such elements. So that shows the level of radicalization in Pakistan, where a UN designated radical Islamist terrorist like Hafiz Muhammad Saeed or that Maulana of terror Masood Azhar are seen as freedom fighters and state guests and not terrorists. And in fact, India for decades has also had to battle with China, a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, blocking sanctions against these terrorists who had led India for a very long time, until there was some transactional give and take between India and China, and finally China would withdraw its block on sanctioning of terrorists. So for India, it's been a long battle to emerge on top of the situation by bombing Bahawalpur and Muridke, and not just stopping at bombing Bahawalpur and Muridke, but also bombing 11 Pakistani air bases, including Noor Khan and Sargodha, and Jacobabad and Mushaf, and from Skardu in Pakistan-occupied Jammu Kashmir down to Bholari in Sindh. That's the time you send across a message, whether you are backed by China or not, whether you claim to be a nuclear weapon state or not. When India has to punish terror and sponsors, they will be punished. So that's the biggest message of Op Sindoor. And, when after completing that message, you're on world stage, and this is a global stage, you automatically get respect from across the world. When you stand up to a $30 trillion economy, when you stand up to US bullying, and when you stand by your friends, whether it's Russia here or Israel there, it just goes on to show that you're a strong leader and a strong country that's charting out an independent foreign policy that automatically gets respect. That's exactly what's happening right now. So while groups condemning terror is good, India punishing terror is even better.
Geeta, as far as India's expectations are concerned, Gaurav did mention just a few moments ago that he doesn't really expect much to change. In spite of the optics and everything else, China will, in fact, once again prove, and it won't be of any surprise or shock to anyone, that Pakistan is really its all-weather friend. But the fact of the matter is that this issue has been raised once again. Now, talking a little about what has happened after that between as far as the bilateral here between Russia and India is concerned. This, of course, comes in the backdrop of the bullying tactics that we've seen on the part of America. Having said that, talk to us about what else is on the agenda apart from discussing peace between Russia and Ukraine. What are the deliverables from the bilateral that one would expect?
Well, there are many aspects to the relationship.
Yes.
Every time the leaders meet, Sneha, there are various aspects that are covered. One, at the backdrop of what has happened between India and US, the additional tariffs of 25%, making it about a whopping 50% tariffs against India. The conversations will come, but the conversations are not just about how to do it. Peace will ease some of the stress that India is feeling. It's also about whether if Russia can become a market for India. A lot of manufacturers in this cycle would have sent their lot to America. But in the coming cycle, when they produce, because industries will not stop producing, when they produce, they will have no markets to send those goods to, which could lead to a massive economic upheaval in India, including job losses. or else India finds a way to ensure that these products that were to go to America find markets elsewhere. So a conversation with Russia on can you be a market, as would be a conversation with other European countries and other countries in the East as well, whether they can become markets for India or not. So Russia, which primarily imports or has a lot of stuff coming from Europe, a lot of European goods and products, despite and in spite of the sanctions, and produces locally as well, will they start looking at buying Indian apparels, Indian clothes,
Okay.
Indian textiles, so on and so forth. Apart from that, trade, energy, security, digital, rupee ruble payment, defense cooperation, there is so much between India and Russia that the conversation is always long, continuous, and continued. This is only one of the leadership level meetings that is taking place, Neha. There's going to be an annual summit for which President Putin is going to be in India in months from now.
That's right. In the month of December is what is expected. I'm just going to come back to you, Geeta, in a moment from now to tell our viewers that both nations have in fact met as well. The External Affairs Minister S. Shankar met his Russian counterpart in Moscow just a week ago to discuss what Geeta was really referring to at this point in time, the entire gamut of the relationship between both the nations. I'm also going to bring in this conversation Ksenia Kondratieva, who is in fact a well-known journalist from Russian TV, and she joins us from Moscow at this point in time. Thank you so much for connecting. I'd like to get in your views and your perspective on what has been said, at least for the time being, by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the ties between Russia and India. He's spoken about how both countries have been in continuous conversation. He's spoken also about how both countries have stood by each other in difficult times, is what our Prime Minister said. Also spoke about the need for peace between Russia and Ukraine.
Right. Thanks for having me. We are closely watching for these meetings both yesterday and today here in Moscow, because, of course, India is an important partner, has been always an important partner, not only at times when Russia is at odds with the West, but even before. And it's important for many things. It's not just strong ties, decades old and tested. This is actually very important because, this explains Prime Minister Modi's words. And Mr. Putin also noted the same in his remarks, that these ties have been tested, the partnership has been tested. Why? Because actually, if you look at the relationship between the two countries over 7 decades, right, there has been no instance where the countries had some real concerns between each other, some kind of actions that can be considered as betrayal. Both countries have not been lecturing each other on how to deal with other countries, with third parties, whom to trade with, whom to have, political conversation with. That has never been the case between Russia and India. And I think that is very well respected by, by leaders, by diplomats, by policymakers, by experts. This is something that has been very unique, actually, about Russia-India relationship.
It's a very interesting point that you make, and I'd like to bring in Gaurav on that. Gaurav, I recall, there was just so much pressure on India to condemn, first the tensions and then the conflict when it did start between Russia and Ukraine. Domestic pressure as well from the opposition back home in the country, this playing out as India being silent to, so-called atrocities, and also on Russia and Ukraine war. India in that sense has stood its ground, isn't it? And always, like Geeta also mentioned a few moments ago, as that it was one of the first few countries to, in fact, say that peace is the only way forward without really interfering between both the nations, isn't it? And that is something what is being said is respected widely in Russia as well. Gaurav. Coming back to you, in fact, in a moment from now, I'm just going to come back to you. Just like to tell our viewers, This bilateral has now ended. The bilateral between Russia and India, between the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, President Vladimir Putin, has just ended. To tell our viewers that it went on, in fact, for 40 minutes or so during this bilateral meeting. This is what we are learning. With the Prime Minister, the Russian President Vladimir Putin has said, "I'm feeling very happy after meeting you, as CEO provides a platform to unite the countries of the global South and East." December 21, 2025 marks the 15th anniversary of the elevation of India-Russia ties to a special and privileged strategic partnership. We enjoy a multifaceted relationship. Today's meeting is expected to provide a significant boost to the India-Russian relationship. For more on that, I'm going to go straight across, in fact, to Gaurav. Gaurav, later in the year, a visit from the Russian president is also something that India is going to be looking at closely. What else are you picking up as far as the bilateral here? It went on for 40 minutes is concerned.
So Prime Minister Narendra Modi is believed to have renewed that invitation to the Russian president to visit India in December 2025 for that annual bilateral summit. They did review their bilateral ties and various other fields in which India and Russia are moving forward. But that principal point that India made, the request that had come in from the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky for peace between Russia and Ukraine, the Prime Minister in fact initiated that conversation, flanked by Ajit Doval, India's National Security Advisor, and Vikram Misri, India's Foreign Secretary, on either side. The Prime Minister's point very emphatically was the quest for peace, because that would benefit the entire humankind. Unfortunately, lakhs of lives have been lost and people have been injured in the Russia-Ukraine war that started in February 2022. It would have ended in a week, sadly, in a week when that Turkey moderated ceasefire was to take effect. When the dialogue was happening, Ukraine backed off, according to Russia, under British pressure, and Boris Johnson subsequently even visited Ukraine. And Europe and America stand accused of, they kept fueling that war for 3 years plus and counting, and lakhs of lives have been lost and injured on either side, and the war still continues. So India's effort has been talk to each other, find common ground, and have peace in the interest of humankind so that bloodshed can be stopped. Prime Minister visited Russia, Prime Minister has visited Ukraine. He's offered all assistance, but then left the decision entirely to the two principals, making it very clear there cannot be peace until both the principals are at the talks table simultaneously. So anyone that plays a third-party role between Russia and Ukraine, they have to ensure both Russia and Ukraine are on the same table.
Absolutely. I'm going to bring in Senior as well in this conversation. Senior, your response to what has been said by Russia as far as the multifaceted relationship between both the nations concerned. Geeta touched upon it as well a few moments ago, talking about this whole gamut of the relationship that both countries have: economic, trade, historical, cultural. And this is something that is reflected in this bilateral as well, as far as the takeaways here and the deliverables here from this bilateral is concerned, isn't it?
See, of course, you have to see the backdrop of this particular meeting because in the past few weeks, actually Washington, which considers New Delhi as its partner, as its important strategic partner, has moved completely, against India, imposing the tariffs, threatening to impose more, saying that it's over its energy trade and defense trade with Russia. But I think the view from Moscow and the view which we read and hear from India as well, that it's not much because of India's relationship with Russia. It's rather an instrument to, coerce India into, whatever trade pact and other relationship that are favorable to the U.S., which is again, we go back to today's statements by Russian and Indian leaders, coercing someone and threatening someone to get better deals is not the way. If you see, I've been covering Russia-India relationship for past 15 years, and for the past decade, the relationship has always been good and steady and nice because there is a lot of warmness. it's not just transactional like it happens with other countries probably, but the ties have not been, the economic ties have not been growing that fast. Of course, Russia, the Soviet Union at that time, helped India's economy right after independence. It had a lot of influence. It helped building factories, steel factories. Then there was relationship in oil refining and so on. But what we see in the past 3 years is a totally different dynamics. And it's not just the oil trade. It's not just defense trade, which are considered the common pillars. It's something more than that. It's a lot of cooperation in technology, in education. It's not something that the countries necessarily publicly talk about. Again, because of sanctions, because they want to keep it to themselves. But we can clearly see the change. And why it is happening? Because both Russia and India know that they can trust each other. They will not go into all this tariff policy or, let's say, unexpected voting in the UN or things like this. They have this trust at all possible levels. It doesn't mean that they are completely agree on everything. And again, Prime Minister Modi has been saying since 2022, since their meeting in Uzbekistan, right, that this is not the era of war. But by saying that, he's, probably translating the feeling in the entire global South, which has been affected by the conflict, not by the conflict per se, but by the geopolitical changes, by the enormous sanctions that were imposed on Russia, which has broken the entire supply chains across the world. This has affected the globe. But he never told Mr. Putin, okay, do this and that, because he knows that Russia and Ukraine will decide how to basically end this conflict. I remember India was asked many times, and Mr. Jaishankar was asked many times whether India will act as sort of a mediator. And what India said that if such requests come, India is open to, but it has never proactively, unlike US President Donald Trump probably, said that it wants to be a peacemaker. India just says that we need peace, and everyone says that, yes, we need peace.
Right. But
how to
the big
achieve
question
is
that have we done enough to carry a signal, isn't it, Sinya? I'm going to also bring in Geeta in this conversation. Geeta Mohan and Gaurav continue to be with us. Okay, going back to, in fact, Geeta in a moment from now, Gaurav also, in fact, Xenia continues to be with us. Gaurav, India has never really actively, in that sense, played the role of a mediator, isn't it? India did not travel to Alaska. It was Donald Trump trying to broker that peace, in fact, as far as the meeting in Alaska was concerned. But has that signal been carried to Putin, given the call that was made from the Ukrainian president to India, to Prime Minister Modi, yesterday, as far as this meeting is concerned between, in fact, Russia and India today? Has that signal been carried, Gaurav?
So historically, India and Russia have been very close, but do keep in mind, when the Soviet Union split and Ukraine became an independent country, India was the first country to recognize even Ukraine. So India's ties with Ukraine have been historic and equally significant. Point one. Point two, it was Ukraine that chose to sell military hardware to Pakistan. For example, when India was buying the T-72 tanks from Russia, the T-80 UD tanks were provided by Ukraine to Russia. At the same to Pakistan. At the same time, India did not stop buying either the AN-32 medium lift transport aircraft, which was the lifeline of the Indian Air Force in the Siachen Glacier, because these are short takeoff aircraft, very, very powerful engines, Antonovs that are manufactured in Ukraine. In fact, Kiev was the factory which was destroyed in Russian bombing subsequently. So India continued taking not just the Antonov aircraft aircraft, AN-32s, after AN-12s initially in the 1950s and 60s, but also ship engines were coming from there. A lot of other equipment was coming from there, military equipment, and Indian medical students were studying in Ukraine. So India was equalizing its relation both with Russia and Ukraine, much closer to Russia. However, when this war happened, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was invited both by Russia and by Ukraine. He went to both the countries, delivered each other's message, but the point was sit with each other and find a solution. Should you require help, we are there, but it's for you to find a solution.
And just a moment, I want to bring in fact, Xu Jinshen, a CGTN reporter, joining us live from Tianjin. I really hope I'm pronouncing your name right. Apologies if I'm not, do correct me. I want to, in fact, just ask you, and do put this into perspective. There's been a fair amount of conversation when it comes to China's active role in terms of the kind of support that is always lended to its all-weather partner, Pakistan. Today, India has condemned, SCO has condemned the Pahalgam terror attacks here in Jammu and Kashmir in India. You know, the big question is, how far is China going to really walk the talk when it comes to, in fact, in a way, showing the mirror to Pakistan and also standing by India, given how continuously India has always been a victim of terror. Your take on what has been communicated by the SCO today?
So first of all, we have to mention that, send condolence to those who are affected and died in cold during those terrorist attacks or whatnot. And the Tianjin Declaration has been issued by the world leaders during this morning's meeting that condemn terrorist attacks. And if we're talking about Shanghai Cooperation Organization for its 24 years of existence, that security issue has been a top priority, counterterrorism, if we're calling it. And the SCO has been providing a platform I would consider. If we're talking about India and Pakistan, both countries joined the SCO the same year in 2017. And that means the two sides are actually talking with each other. And of course, that from that Tianjin Declaration, the SCO's regional anti-terrorist structure has been praised by those world leaders to really tackle terrorist attacks. And if we look back in history in 2024, competent authorities of SCO member states have prevented 43 terrorist activities and stopped over 13,000 crimes related to terrorism, separatism, and extremism. More than 2,000 leaders and members of international terrorist organizations were detained. And we could definitely see there's greater results from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the organization is promoting mechanism improvement in security cooperation. And if we recall earlier today, Chinese President Xi Jinping has said that the organization should push forward to establish this universal center for security threats. And if we're coming back to the Shanghai spirit of this organization, mutual trust and mutual benefit.
In fact, I'm just going to ask you to continue to be with us, because this is a conversation that will continue in just a bit from now, asking all of you to continue to be with us. We get you all the details as far as the SCO summit is concerned, India's role at the SCO summit is concerned, the important bilateral with China and with Russia is something that we are breaking down for our viewers. At the moment, it's time for a quick commercial break. Here on the other side, a continuous coverage of the SCO summit in Tianjin.
Moto G96 5G. All eyes on you.
Choose a world where we dream, and the limit is the sky. And this world is my home where I'm living my best.
Mindfully crafted home decor fabrics. Sansar, a D-Decor brand. Live consciously.
How is he always winning?
Gotta have some spin, never blending, dripping, like so clean.
Moto G96 5G.
All eyes on you.
Hello, Moto.
Moto G96 5G. All eyes on you.
Hi, here are the top headlines. Presented by Motorola.
PM Modi warns SCO against terrorism, separatism, extremism. Chinese President Xi Jinping slams US bullying at ASEO summit. Floods wreak havoc. 16 dead in Chamba. Yamuna rises.
Longest-standing biannual survey, India Today Mood of the Nation. How many seats for BJP elections were held today? How do you rate Operation Sindoor? How is the opposition performing? Who is India's best chief minister? Who should be the next prime minister? India Today Mood of the Nation has the answers. Don't miss out. 500 rupees off on all digital and print plus digital plans.
So sorry.